everyone, hope you are good and be happy always. Once again, welcome to Shachi's Academy, and today we will discuss chapter 6 for Indian Economic Development for class 12 CBSE NCERT. India is a nation where large number of people reside in rural areas, and that's why it is utmost important for every government of India to take care of rural development. So to discuss rural development, we will discuss first of all the part 1 of this chapter. Let us start with the topic highlights. This chapter focuses on rural development in terms of economic growth of rural areas by eradicating the lingering and emerging challenges to attain economic growth of India. So, we will discuss the long-term challenges and the emerging challenges of rural development and how they can be eradicated and how they can be combated. We will discuss that. Need for rural development. Economic growth should be balanced with both agricultural and industrial growth as happened in other countries. See, in India, what is happening? We are growing very fastly. India has become the fifth largest economy of the world, but still, its rural areas are lagging behind. Only the urban areas or the cities or the towns are developing. So, it is unbalanced growth. But in other nations, what happens? Rural areas or agricultural sector also grows with your industrial sector. So we need to take care of rural sector if India needs to grow in real essence of the term. So we have to develop our rural areas. Then Indian reforms have neglected agricultural sector and just focused on industrial development. When India started its new economic policy, then it neglected agricultural sector. Only industries were taken care of and development of industries happened, but agricultural sector lagged behind. So this led to unbalanced growth in your economy. Now we need to take care of our agricultural sector, and with that we will take care of our rural sector also. Agricultural sector is largely neglected and its growth is as low as 2% against overall 7 to 8% growth of Indian economy. You might have read in newspapers or heard in your news, online news, that growth of economy is 7 to 8%, but no one speaks about the growth rate of agricultural sector. It is only 2%. So you can see the difference. There is a huge difference in growth rate of agricultural and industrial sector in India. It has led to gigantic rural-urban divide. This is gigantic or not? A margin of 5 to 6% of growth rate is very huge, and that's why rural areas are still undeveloped or underdeveloped in India, and cities are developing at a very fast pace in India. Agricultural sector has become a stumbling block in economic growth of India. See what happens if in your family one person has become a scientist and went to NASA, and he is earning a huge amount of money, but another brother, another person is just living hand to mouth. So what will happen? You will have to help that brother of yours or family member of yours. That means you can't grow fully. Your family will always be lagging behind in economic status. So what should be done? Both of the family members or all the family members should grow at equal rate. This exactly holds true for your India also. Its agricultural sector and industrial sector should grow alongside. They should equally grow. Otherwise, agriculture will remain a stumbling block. That means a hurdle in economic development, overall development of India. Done. Meaning of rural development. Rural development means an action plan for the social and economic growth of the rural. The action plan is to focus on the lingering and emerging challenges in rural areas. So it is a plan. It is a short-term plan and along with the long-term strategy that should be adopted for eradicating the challenges of rural development and attaining rural development. Lingering or emerging challenges, and emerging challenges, what are lingering? That means long-term challenges that we have been facing since our independence. What are the challenges of rural credit? People in rural areas do not have adequate source of credit. They can't find money for their development, for their personal needs, or setting up any business enterprise or for improvement on their fields. So they have lack of money or credit in their economy. The challenge of rural marketing. Suppose if they develop their agriculture, they have grown a good farm and their produce is very good. They have a very good yield of tomato, or they have very good yield of onion, vegetables, etc., other greens, but they are not able to sell that produce in market nicely, because in some of the areas of India, mandis, or you can say the markets, agricultural markets, are very far away from those rural areas, and the transportation costs are very huge, and in many cases they don't have any means of transportation also. They carry their loads of produce in bullock carts or other animal driven carts, etc. So it makes it very difficult for them to sell their produce at right price at right places. So market facilities are very low in rural areas. Then emerging challenges. These were the challenges which Indian agriculture or farmers have been facing since independence and before that even. But what are emerging? Emerging challenges means that nowadays what are the challenges? The need for diversification of productive activities and the need for organic farming. Diversification of productive activities, what are they? See, in agriculture sector, there is farming, that is the basic thing that we can do in agriculture fields, but we have many types of works that, like in dairy farms you can get employment, or you can open some vegetable shops, or processing units you can set up, or juice factories can be set up, and other types of works can be done alongside, just like cultivation of fishing can be done, cultivation of other animals can be done, cattle rearing can be done, animal husbandry can be done. All these diversification is needed in your agriculture sector in India. Then the need for organic farming. Nowadays people are very much attracted towards agricultural produce and organic produce. So organic farming is gaining traction with people and it is becoming famous. So now there is need for making provisions for organic farming. Then we have other elements of action plan. What are they? Development of means of transport to link rural areas with urban areas. So it is utmost important to link all the areas, rural areas of India to urban areas, so that people living in rural areas can come to cities whenever they want. They can sell their produce in city markets wherever they want and whenever they want. Why? Because they can get good price of their produce, and this can lead to increase in income of rural farmers and rural people, and they can lead a very good life. Provision of power supply to rural areas. In many of the villages in India, still they do not have adequate amount of power supply, and in some cases do not have electricity supply at all. So this has to be improved, and all the villages, all the rural areas has to be provided with good electric power supply. Then permanent means of irrigation. Means of irrigation are still very low in rural areas in India. They are dependent on monsoon and they do not have adequate channels of water irrigation. That means they do not have canals, they do not have other motor driven irrigation facilities, tube wells, etc. So this has to be helped by the government for this sector. Then facilities for agricultural research. Agricultural research is lacking in India. Why? Because population is huge and we have huge pressure of facilities of India. But still agricultural research is required in cases where we have typical type of soil, suppose, and you can grow certain crop. In certain crops, in certain fields you can grow cotton, in some other you can grow sugarcane, in some other you can grow flowers. So what is the kind of soil that a farmer can use for particular crops is not decided by farmers. They keep on blindly farming their fields and they are not able to get the maximum produce from their farms. Significance of rural development. Bulk of Indian population resides in rural areas, that is one reason. Then Indian economy cannot grow without growth of rural sector, that is another reason, because there will be unbalanced growth. Then it is needed to increase overall growth rate of Indian economy and attain balanced growth of urban and rural areas. Just now we explained the growth rate of industrial sector or urban areas is 7 to 8% of economy, but of rural areas or agricultural sector is only 2%. So there is huge disparity in the growth rates of both the sectors. This has to be brought at par. Lingering challenges. Lingering challenges that have been existing for long period of rural development. What are they? Rural credit. It means credit for farming. Farmers take loans from productive purposes like purchasing inputs. What are the inputs of farming? Tractors, threshers, crushers, hand pumps, tube wells, etc. are all inputs for agriculture. Then, or unproductive needs like ceremonies and personal expenses. Farmers do have certain personal needs. They undertake marriage processions of their children, or they celebrate some occasions, so they also need expenses for them also. Then farmers need credit because they have small farms and low production. In India, farms are still scattered and of small size, and that small size of farmer fields, farmers are not able to cultivate huge amount of grains and they are not able to sell them in market, and that's why they have very low level of income, and that is not sufficient to fulfill all their needs of life. So they have to take credit from money lenders or from other sources, whichever is available. That they do not produce surplus stock and are only subsistence in nature. Just now I explained, they have very low income, and that's why they normally live hand to mouth, and they don't have any surplus amount of money to take care of their productive and unproductive purchases of life. Gestation lag between owing and harvesting is quite long. Owing, that is sowing, sorry, here it is not owing, it's sowing, S. Okay, so sowing means just putting grains in your fields and then plants come out. That is sowing. Okay, growing plants. Just sowing seeds, and after that a plant grows, it gets ripened up, and then it's harvested. So the gestation period, it will take normally 4 to 6 months to, for a crop to ripen up. So that is a quite long time. In that duration of time, people need some money for certain purchases, for inputs, you can say, for fertilizers or seeds, pesticides, insecticides, and for that they need to take loans. Then they need credit for initial investment on seeds, fertilizers, implements, and some family expenses. These are the needs of farmers for which they take loans or money from landlords or money lenders. Then short-term, medium-term, and long-term credit. What are they? Short-term credit is for inputs like seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and insecticides. Electricity bills, they are raised for 6 to 12 months. So what is the tenure of short-term credit? It is 6 to 12 months, and they need for normal inputs of the agriculture. Then medium-term credit for purchase of machinery. When they need some machinery like tractors, threshers, crushers, etc., they take medium-term loans. For construction of fences, digging wells, they are raised for 12 months to 5 years. So duration is 12 months to 5 years for medium-term loans. Then long-term credit for purchase of additional land, carrying out permanent improvements on the existing land. The period of such loans ranges between 5 to 20 years. When you need additional land, additional fields for your farming, then you need to go for long-term credit. Why? Because land is very expensive to purchase. If they build house, if they buy new land, they need more expenses and huge amount of money, and that loan can be only covered in long duration of time, and that's why this is tenure is 5 to 20 years. Note, farmers may take loans for productive and productive purposes. Sources of rural credit. Non-institutional sources are conventional traditional sources from landlords, money lenders, or from your kinship, just like brothers, sister, neighbors, or other members of the village or rural area. That institutional sources are modern or emerging sources like banks and other institutions. Non-institutional sources, landlords, village traders, money lenders. These are the three important sources of non-institutional rural credit in India. It comprised of 93% of rural borrowing during first 5-year plan in India. So previously, people normally used to take loans from all these three sources. Institutional sources. Institutional sources became popular by 1981. The institutional sources include government and cooperative credit societies give loans to farmers, commercial banks and regional rural banks give loans to farmers. All these sources account for 7% of rural credit during first 5-year plan, but now it has increased to 66%. That means now institutional credit has become famous among rural areas and farmers, and they are not taking loan from non-institutional sources. They no longer take loans from money lenders, landlords, and other rural people. Institutional sources, cooperative credit societies, they provide credit guidance for farming. They contribute 16 to 17% of institutional credit. So cooperative credit societies are a huge source of loans for farmers. These societies try to ensure what? Timely and rapid flow of credit to the farmers. So cooperative societies are just meant for the help of rural people and farmers, and they provide timely credit for farmers for inputs. Elimination of the money lenders as credit agencies. See, money lenders were notorious for charging exorbitant or very high rates of interest from farmers. So it was very painful for the farmers to repay those loans or even repay the interest and principal amount of that loan. So this all has been done away by introduction of cooperative credit societies in India, and now people, especially the farmers in rural areas, are taking loans from these cooperative credit societies, and they have eradicated the prominence of money lenders from rural areas. Then spread credit for facilities across all regions of the country. So it is being spread to all regions of country. provision of adequate credit in areas covered by special programs of development. So many special programs are introduced for upliftment of the farmers in rural areas. Then other institutional sources are State Bank of India and other commercial banks. The State Bank of India was set up in 1955 with a focus on rural credit. This led to nationalization of banks in 1969. So it was primarily set up for interest of your nation, and it was nationalized in 1969 to provide credit to rural people and other sectors of economy for development. Then we have regional rural banks. SBI is very important, but equally important are your regional rural banks, RRBs and land development banks in India. RRBs and land development banks were set up to promote credit supply, particularly in the remote rural areas and backward districts of India. They operate at district level. So RRBs are regional rural banks, and district development banks are land development banks are operating in rural districts, and they help farmers to grow crops nicely, provide them credit for normal inputs of the agriculture and other expenses for farmers. System of institutional credit. Institutional credit comprises of multi-agency system. We have discussed them: commercial banks, RRBs, cooperative credit societies and land development bank. These are four important components, and if question comes for you, what are the components of your institutional credit, you can write them, or what is the type of institution system of credit in India, you can write them, okay, and explain them in detail. Then NABARD, National Bank for Agricultural and Rural Development. This is specifically a bank meant for rural development of India. NABARD is an apex institution handling policy planning and operations in the field of rural credit and related economic activities. It was set up in 1982, so it's the most important organization for rural credit and rural development. Main focus of NABARD, you can just write them, you can put them in notes and write them as it is in your exams also. SAB is apex agency for funding credit to institutions which provide rural credit. So it is meant basically for rural credit. Then improve delivery of credit and train personnel. What is train personnel? Train personnel means people who give loans to farmers. They should be considerate, they should be understanding, because whenever farmers go to banks, they are met with harsh treatment. Then they will not tell their problems to the personnel. Personnel means professionals who are active in your banking services, or who are the people who take care of loans, just like babus and clerks and all the managers, etc. These are personnel. That means people who work in these institutions, these are personnel. So trained personnel has to be there, who can be more considerate towards and more good towards these farmers and give them loans respectfully, in respectful manner. Then coordinate rural financing, maintain liaison with Government of India and other banks. This is a basic function of this NABARD. Then to monitor and evaluate projects refinanced by it. So it refinances projects. What is refinancing? Suppose if I have given you money for some project, but that project is still not complete, I will refinance. That means I will give you some more money to get that project completed at lower rates of interest. Okay, so I have given you loan two times previously, and now again a new loan. That when I give you new loan, that is refinancing you. Kudumbashree. Kudumbashree, the Poor Women's Bank. Kudumbashree was started in 1955 in Kerala as a small savings bank for poor women to encourage savings. Why? Because women who live in rural areas do not have enough amount of money to save in bulk. That means they do not have 10,000, 15,000 at one go, and they can invest in bank or saving bank. They might have, sometimes they might have 200 rupees, sometimes they might have 500 rupees or 1000 rupees. So whatever they can save, they can invest or save in that banks in Kudumbashree. So that is an initiative to encourage savings from rural areas, poor women. Then we have RBI and rural credit. What is the role of Reserve Bank of India and rural credit? See, RBI is what? It is the apex bank which takes care of all the banking system of India. So it is the custodian of all the banking system in India and all the banks. Short term refinance, new loans with lower rates of interest. I just now explained what is that. Facilities for agriculture and allied activities. RBI provides loans for agriculture and allied activities. That is related, agriculture related activities like poultry farming, animal husbandry, horticulture, growing plants, vegetables, going for fishing, cultivating fish, etc. Then development of cooperative credit institutions, it is responsibility of RBI. Expansion of the sources of funds for short-term and long-term wings of the cooperative credit system. Short-term and long-term means which provide for short-term loans and long-term loans. Provision of long-term funds to bring about state partnership in cooperative credit agencies. So cooperative credit agencies get partnership or funds from state government also. Training and professionalization of cooperatives, that is very important, because if your professionals, so the workers who work in banks are not trained, they are not considered towards, they are not good towards farmers, then farmers won't be able to get loans from those banks. Conducting rural credit surveys to determine the coverage of rural households by credit institutions. RBI also conducts surveys to monitor what is the amount of credit that has been given to farmers, or if all the facilities are being provided to farmers, or if nothing haywire or nothing wrong is going on in these cooperative credit societies and other banks. Helping bank branch expansion of program to provide cheaper remittance facilities for banks operating in rural areas. So they provide funds to these banks, then guidance to all concerned on matters related to rural credit. So all the rural credit matters are taken care by your RBI.